this is what I'm doing. This is what I collected from Korean War veterans. And this is the picture and letters and the calendar they used to exile.
See that?
Yeah, that's your patch, 2nd Division. Stars and Stripes and the Korean flag. You have a whole same set. Thank you for your precious time.
Okay.
You are the most popular, most well-known congressman in Korea. And you have a Korean staff here and you have a popular support from your district, the Korean community. Have you imagined that your life will be so tightly connected, strongly connected with the Korean community and the Korean people?
No, but I have never seen people who have been beneficiaries of any action that the United States was involved in that's been more appreciative. The Korean people, I think it's a cultural thing, change their attitudes with anybody that they think was helpful to Korea, especially during the war. And I'm the beneficiary of people loving Korea and at the same time loving the United States of America. So you couldn't find better people to have friends.
That's the consistent message from the Korean War veterans. So, very recently, the President Park delivered a speech in both Congress. And how did you like it? Do you have any special message to the Korean citizens? Greetings?
When a president of a great democracy like South Korea mentions your name in a speech that she's giving to the United States Congress and the Supreme Court and everybody involved, it is very flattering. And so it made me feel good for the services that I rendered for my country and the benefit of South Korea. But it made my colleagues feel good too, that one of their own, and John Conyers and Congressman Johnson, and that we were a part not only in talking about democracy, but fighting for democracy.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
And there's not that many of us left now.
Any special greetings to the Korean audience?
Well, Korea has really been a pride of the United Nations and America. Mm-hmm. That young Koreans may not know or have reason to know the devastating effect that the communist invasion had on their country in 1950. Mm-hmm. And when you couple this with the cruel way in which you had the Japanese occupation, then these are classic examples of man's inhumanity to mankind. And when you see a bright light where people survive and become stronger, then the Korean people should thank God and that they had the resiliency to come from a country, one that was suppressed in their self-esteem, suppressed in terms of who they were compared with the Japanese, but also in having their country run over by their own families and friends in the Civil War. Yeah. And America has gone through that, and you can't imagine the pain it is to be fighting in a war, but when you're fighting with your own blood. Yeah. And the Korea that I left in 1951, there was not a building standing erect. I mean, there was no way for me to think that I would ever go back to Korea, but there was never any thought of Korea being restored to the elevation in terms of civilization that she is now. Yeah. To be a world power, a metropolitan, industrialized country, a democracy, a trading partner of the United States, to have so many Koreans want to become American citizens, I think completely justifies our intrusion in stopping the communists. Mm-hmm.
I read your short bio and you're from Harlem, and it says that you were a high school dropout. And around the time that the Korean War broke out, what were you doing? Well, could you talk about your family background, where you were born, your birthday, and so on?
Yeah, I was born in New York and went to school in New York, attended the same public schools as my mother did. I didn't have a father around the house. He left us pretty early in my childhood. I was 5 or 6 years old. And I lived with different relatives when I was a kid, but when I got to be 17, I decided to join the Army. My brother had enlisted in the Army before World War II, and he was tremendous help to my mother and the family by being able to send home checks that he received as a military person, and I wanted to do the same thing, and I did. I had no idea on that day, Sunday in December of 1950, we were alerted that we were going to Korea. And I was glad to go because I wanted to get out of Fort Lewis, Washington. I had no idea where Korea was.
You didn't know nothing about Korea?
Nothing about Korea. And they said it was a police action, so I thought it was a riot, and I'd go there, and And on the boat, it took us 13 days for us to be mentally trained because we were the first military to leave the United States.
Mm-hmm.
The 24th Division was in Japan. The 25th Division was in Japan.
Mm-hmm.
And they had lost most all of South Korea. And it was a question whether we could land even in Busan.
Mm-hmm.
So we were trained, as a matter of fact, just before Korea, we had just come back from Hawaii. We invaded Hawaii with artillery and infantry, and it was a joint force. And we won in Hawaii against enemy forces. So we were prepared to go to Korea. We were able to advance from Busan, past the 38th parallel, all the way up past Pyongyang. And we were stationed then on the Yalu River, overlooking Manchuria, ready to go home before the Chinese came in.
Tell me about those two incidents where that you got awarded with the Purple Heart and Bronze Star, and I know that you were engaging with the severe battle with the Chinese soldiers. Could you tell me the details about how you got?
We had thought that the war was over in the fall of 1950. North Koreans were surrendering all over.
Mm-hmm.
This was after the Incheon landing, where United Nations forces landed behind the North Koreans. So you had us coming up from the south, and you had the international armed forces surrounding the North Koreans. So the war was really over as far as we were concerned. There was a big dispute between General MacArthur and the President Truman. A lot of it had to do with whether or not we should continue to move it to China. But I don't understand, even as I talk with you, why we were unaware that tens of thousands of Chinese would be able to cross the Yalu River and completely surround my division and the 8th Army. How that happened, when we had air superiority, I'll never know. But it happened. And so, it was late November that some of the advanced teams were reporting that some people were captured by Chinese. No one believed them. And in the event, what happened was, when they would come back to the outfit, we would send them home because of this experience that they had. And then finally, it became a reality that we were surrounded. And we had officers being helicoptered out from the... And when the Chinese hit, for 3 days, they talked to us in perfect English.
Oh, really?
Telling us to surrender, that it was not our war, that we were black troops, and that we were not treated equally, and that this was a civil war, and that we should surrender. And then they would put on people that they had captured from your own outfit. And I remember, this is Sergeant Willie Thompson. The Chinese are right. We should surrender. I shouldn't be here. They've been treating me good. And then they would put on the names of so many people that they had captured. And at night, they would just blow the bugles, and you hear these voices telling you that if you don't give up, you're going to be killed, and we don't want to kill you. So psychologically, there were so many soldiers that froze to death because they fell asleep. And they just froze to death. And in the event, when the Chinese hit on November 30th, I got caught in it. I was on a tractor.
Remember, when was that?
November 30th,
Okay.
1950.
Mm-hmm.
It's called the Battle of Coonaray.
Coonaray, yeah.
And we got beaten up pretty badly. A lot of people were captured. A lot of people were wounded. A lot of people were killed. And so I was able, even though I was wounded, to go to a mountain that I saw somebody go up the mountain. And I didn't know where I was going, but I knew I was getting away from the mountain pass. And a lot of people followed me.
What was your rank at the time?
I was acting sergeant.
Oh, okay.
And after we looked back and we looked down, after we climbed the mountain, you could see the Chinese were like ants going through the vehicles and taking away Americans and searching the Americans. It was a terrible sight to see. And then American planes would come over to kill the Chinese and blow up American equipment. And we were so afraid that they were going to blow us up with it. But we kept walking and marching and sticking together. And finally, a U.S. glider saw us and dropped food to us.
Oh.
And circled us and gave us the direction which we should go. And it seems as though some people were saying that if we got past this body of water, it was like a brook, not a river, but a brook. If we got over that and didn't come back, the Chinese would not follow us. And so they had a raft that was made by somebody, and they put us on this raft, and there must have been over 40 of us. And then they had ambulances on the other side. And they took us to a hospital, all of us. But that was the worst day I've had in my life.
Huh.
So I wrote a book saying that since November 30th, I haven't had a bad day since that time, because what could be worse mentally and physically? And I really thought there was no chance for me to live.
Amazing that you were wounded, but you were not caught as a prisoner of war, and you were able to lead all those, your friends and colleagues there.
You know, when you're in a situation like I was in, you're not even aware about what you're doing. You do it for survival. And that's what military training allows you. When I look at a map today, I get lost. Somehow I was able to read that map that we had. Someone had a map. And I was able, for things that they were teaching us in training that I wasn't even listening to, but all of these things came back to me.
So you got those knowledge from the basic military training?
No, I didn't get it from my hometown. You're right.
So you're infantry, right? You were infantry.
Yes.
What was your special unit? What is your specialty?
Well, actually, I was in an infantry division, but we were trained in artillery. And you had the 105s and you had the 155s. I was trained to direct fire for the 155 millimeter howitzers. But we lost our guns so quickly when we got there, and we weren't prepared to have these tractor-driven guns to be able to negotiate those mountain passes. So when you hit one tank, or you hit one tractor, or you hit one gun, you stop the communication on the mountain pass. So many of the guns and trucks had to be pushed over the mountain because they were disabled.
Yeah.
And what happened to us is that we then became infantry.
Real infantry.
And real infantry. So we lost our guns more than once. And then everybody was infantry. It was chaotic. There was no such thing as what is your specialty. Your specialty was kill or being killed. And that was amazingly a rough period of time.
Do you still keep in contact with those people that you
Most
led?
all of them are gone. We used to meet regularly. As a matter of fact, sometime in 1953, I got out of the Army in 1952, and a lot of our prisoners were being released, and they weren't allowed to re-enlist. They were not. Now, they have had 4 years before the Korean War, and they were kept 4 years, so they had about 10 years service, and 10 more years they would have retirement. So they wanted to stay in the Army, but reports of their behavior as prisoners of war said that they were not eligible because they were not true to the American flag for conduct that they had. Now, I was in law school at the time, and I knew the people that they were talking about that were in prison. And I went to the Army, even though I wasn't a lawyer, and asked, how could you possibly judge the conduct of an American that's being denied medical treatment, being denied food, and you're saying he was unkind to another prisoner? Whatever conduct they conducted themselves in was under this type of inhumane treatment. And then it got into the newspapers, and a lot of these veterans were allowed to re-enlist. And so we met quite often after that. A lot of the people that were enlisted people were allowed to stay in Korea and become lieutenants. And so one of the guys that was a corporal under me came home as a colonel because he stayed, he never came back from Korea. And so, yes, we did have reunions, but unfortunately most all of them died. You know, you have to be at least 81 years old. You had to be in Korea, you had to be at least 18 years old.
Right. This is what I collected from the criminal veterans. Were you able to write back to your family, or did you take any pictures? Do you have any artifacts that you can share with us?
Probably, but not where I'm sitting now. No, as a matter of fact, I was so lucky that I had a girlfriend that when I went into the Army, she started teaching school. And she would write every day. And there were so many people in my unit that had no family and no one to write. And she would have these 6- and 7-year-old kids to write all of them. So when mail call came, I was the most popular guy there because the kids were writing to them. Their families sent them boxes and cakes and stuff. But I have some pictures of Korea. I think there's one over there too. You can take a look after the cameras leave. But I look at all of that you've collected, and all I see is my 2nd Infantry patch.
Yes.
You know, and
That's all they are looking for. Where is my patch?
that's it. That's what you call unit pride. We call it 2nd Infantry Division, second to none.
Yeah. There was a segregation policy when you served there, right?
Yes.
Tell me about it.
Well, we had heard that the Army was desegregated in 1948 by executive order from President Truman.
Yeah.
I can assure you, by 1952, it did not get down to the troops at all. The only thing that was integrated in the 2nd Infantry Division were 2 units. It was the 3rd Regiment of the 9th Infantry Division. They were all black.
Mm-hmm.
And the 503rd Field Artillery Battalion, which I was in, which was all black.
All black?
Yes, with the exception of officers.
Yeah, obviously.
Now, when I came home and went to Oklahoma, it still was segregation on the post. Now, gradually, those things have changed. But anyone who tells you that in 1950 the Army was integrated, that's just not so.
Do you have grandchildren in the age of, or great-grandchildren in the age of high school or college?
No.
No?
I have grandchildren that are too young and children that are much older.
No.
One's a lawyer and one is the mother of my grandkids.
The Korean War Veterans Digital Memorial Foundation is hosting the first workshop for the descendants of the Korean War veterans.
If a Korean veteran was alive or his family was alive and you were making an offer of scholarship to the children, they would have to receive the scholarships rather than just to come for a reunion, because they have nothing in common. The fact that their grandparents were in a war didn't bring them any closer together. So that the only thing that I was saying is a great idea is actually sending these kids to college.
This year is the 6th years anniversary of the U.S.-Korea alliance. At the same time, it's the 6th years anniversary of the armistice. 60 years, even after this official ceasefire, and how we can get toward to the peaceful settlement in the Korean Peninsula.
Well, I think it's clear that North Korea, economically and politically, could not exist if it was not for the People's Republic of China. And whatever political reasons that they are supporting North Korea, internationally, it's a very dangerous thing to do. China has been responsible as it relates to maintaining international peace. But there's an assumption that you're dealing with rational people who understand the dangers of war. This does not exist in North Korea today. Nobody is confident as to what the so-called leader of North Korea may do. And so it seems to me that we have to put all types of international pressure on China to be working with the allies that she has in Japan and the United States to make it abundantly clear that if North Korea continues to be a threat to South Korea, that all economic assistance and military assistance will be severed.
What is the status of the U.S.-Korea alliance, and where should we go from now?
The relationship between Korea and the United States could not be better. We have to expand that alliance to put pressure on North Korea so we can start talking about a unified Korea. Just as we had the pain of a civil war in this country, where people with the same blood were fighting and kill each other, that is the stigma, that the history that Korea has now, North and South. This will not be treated fairly in terms of history. People killing people is bad enough, but killing each other's families is even worse.
What do you think your most important contribution as a congressman in the United States of America?
Being selected for 22 times by my constituents, my friends and supporters, that saying that in their opinion, I was the best one to represent them in the United States Congress. It's a high honor and a high privilege.
Final question. Any message to the young generations to come for both America and the Republic of Korea?
Well, we hope we left a better world than what we inherited, but whatever we left, the peace and tranquility of the future is in their hands. And the experiences that they've had, even though they may not seem important today, as they grow older, as fortunately I have been able to do, all of the strengths and spiritual indoctrination will come and make them better people for their community, their country, and therefore the world.
Mm-hmm.
Kamsahamnida.
Thank you very much, Congressman.
Okay.